For 15 years she paid for her sins in absolute darkness. Her name was Kaelin, a brilliant Cathar scientist, condemned by her own people. Her punishment for forbidden knowledge and a forbidden love was to have her world stolen, her starlight eyes scorched into useless scars, her bloodline severed forever. She became a ghost, a cautionary tale whispered in the pristine halls of her homeworld. But on a remote human outpost after 5,475 days of night, a man named Dr. Aris Thorne made her an impossible offer, a chance to see again. He promised her light. He never told her that the light would reveal a truth more terrifying than the darkness she had grown to know. Kepler's drift was a symphony of 1,000 alien tongues and 10,000 mechanical heartbeats, but for Kaelin it was a world painted only in sound, texture, and scent. The station hummed with a low-frequency vibration she could feel in the marrow of her bones, a constant reminder of the recycled air and artificial gravity that kept its inhabitants alive. For 15 years, this manufactured reality had been her entire universe. Her small Hab unit number, 734 in the civilian sector, smelled of the hydroponic moon herbs she cultivated and the faint ozonic tang of her filtration unit. Her long, slender fingers, tipped with claws, she kept meticulously blunted, traced the familiar path from her sleep couch to the nutrient dispenser. Every surface was a landmark, every temperature change a signpost. The cool metal of the bulkhead, the rough polymer of a cargo crater, the warm rush of air from a ventilation shaft, this was how she saw. A chime, soft and melodic, signaled a proximity alert at her door. It was a custom setting. The standard klaxon was too jarring. She straightened her tall feline frame, the fine silvery fur on her arms bristling slightly. Her large tufted ears swiveled towards the sound, analyzing the subtle shifts in air pressure. Visitors were rare. Most residents of the drift gave her a wide berth, the scarred, milky white voids of her eyes a disquieting sight. They knew the whispers, the disgraced Cathar, the muted one. "Enter," she said, her voice a low, resonant purr that had lost its warmth over the years. The door slid open with a pneumatic hiss. The sounds that followed were unfamiliar. The soft scuff of human-made boots on the deck, plating not the silent tread of a Cathar or the heavy clump of a Rigelian. The scent was a complex mix of sterile medical-grade antiseptic, roasted caffeine beans, and something uniquely, faintly saline human. Kaelin of the Cathar. The voice was a human male's, a baritone with a steady, calm cadence. It held no pity, a fact she registered with a flicker of surprise. Pity was the currency most strangers tried to offer her. "I am Kaelin," she replied, turning her head to face the sound. Her scarred eyes, forever fixed forward, gave the unnerving impression that she was looking straight through him. "You are a long way from the medbay doctor." She could smell his profession on him. A moment of silence, and she heard the subtle intake of his breath. "You know who I am. I know your scent. Dr. Aris Thorne, Chief of Xenocybernetic Integration. Your work on neural interfaces is ambitious." Kaelin's life in darkness had honed her other senses to a razor's edge, but her mind, the mind of a brilliant scientist, had starved for stimulation. She consumed audio logs and technical journals voraciously. She knew of Aris Thorne. "My work is why I'm here," he said, his footsteps moving slightly closer. She tracked the sound perfectly. He was standing 3 meters away, just beyond the edge of her central workstation. "I have a proposition for you. I do not require medical assistance." The words were automatic, a shield she had raised thousands of times. "This isn't about assistance," Aris countered, his tone unwavering. "It's about restoration." Kaelin's ears flattened against her skull. A cold, familiar dread washed over her. Hope was a poison she had purged from her system a decade ago. It only ever led to pain. There is nothing to restore. The judiciary of Catharia Prime was thorough. My optic nerves were severed and cauterized. The cellular structure of the retina was dissolved. They are empty sockets filled with scar tissue. Your human technology cannot regenerate what no longer exists. I'm not proposing regeneration, Aris said, and she heard the subtle rustle of him retrieving a data slate. I've spent the last 7 years developing a new kind of sensory prosthetic. It's not about fixing the old hardware. It's about installing something entirely new. A synthetic crystalline lens that interfaces directly with the visual cortex, bypassing the optic nerve entirely. I call it the Archimedes system. She remained silent, her posture rigid. He was speaking of impossibilities. The Cathar visual cortex was exponentially more complex than a human's. Their eyes, once capable of seeing into the near-ultraviolet spectrum, processed information at a rate that would induce seizures in a human brain. As if reading her thoughts, Aris continued, I know about Cathar physiology. I've studied it extensively. Your brain's neuroplasticity is incredible. The system I've designed is specifically calibrated for it. It would be a challenge, the largest of my career. But I believe it will work. Kaelin finally turned her body away from him, a gesture of dismissal. Why me? There are countless blind individuals on this station, humans even. Why seek out a disgraced alien exile for your grand experiment? The air in the small room grew heavy, grew. She heard Aris take another step forward, his voice lowering slightly, losing its clinical edge and taking on a different quality, a haunted quality. Because the damage done to you wasn't accidental. It was deliberate, precise, and absolute. It represents the ultimate challenge. If I can undo what your people did to you, if I can give sight back to someone from whom it was so completely stolen, then I can do anything. He paused, and his next words were almost a whisper. My sister Chloe. She went blind in a shuttle accident when I was just an intern, a piece of shrapnel, a 1 in a million shot. The technology didn't exist. I watched her fade away in a world she could no longer see. I've spent my life trying to build the tools I didn't have then. Kaelin felt an unwelcome tremor in her heart. His pain was a tangible thing in the room, an acrid scent mingling with the antiseptic. It was genuine. This wasn't about fame or scientific glory. It was about a ghost. You want to exorcise your own demons by meddling with mine, she stated flatly. Maybe Aris conceded without shame. But you'd be able to see the sun again. Or at least the station's simulation of one. Kaelin stood motionless for a full minute, the hum of the station filling the silence. The memory of light was a faded tapestry in her mind. She remembered the twin suns of Catharia Prime, one gold, one blue, casting dual shadows across the crystalline sands. She remembered the bioluminescent glow of the Lyra flora in her laboratory, their petals pulsing with soft green light. She remembered the silver flecks in the eyes of the man she had loved. These memories were all she had. But they were ghosts, too. The risks, she said, her voice barely a breath, are significant, Aris answered honestly. Neural rejection, sensory overload psychosis, even death. Your brain hasn't processed visual stimuli in 15 years. Waking it up could be a catastrophic shock. The Cathar judiciary will consider this a violation of their sentence. They could demand your extradition. She gave a dry, humorless chuckle. They would not waste the fuel. To them I am already dead. She turned back to face him, the scarred, dead things that were her eyes finding the source of his voice. You offer me a sunrise, Dr. Thorne. but I have lived in the night for so long, I'm not sure I remember what to do with the day." "You won't have to remember," Aris said, his voice firm with conviction. "You'll learn. Again." A single terrifying thought bloomed in the darkness of her mind. What if he was right? The medbay on Kepler's Drift was a world away from the quiet solitude of Kalen's Hab unit. Here the symphony was a cacophony, the frantic beeping of vital sign monitors, the hiss of hydraulic lifts, the low murmur of conversations in a dozen languages, all layered over the sterile scent of sanitizing agents that scoured the air. For Kalen, it was a disorienting assault. She walked with one hand on Aris's arm, her claws retracted her ears, twitching to process the flood of chaotic information. Aris led her to his private research lab, a sealed-off section at the core of the medical wing. The door slid shut behind them, and the external noise muted to a distant hum. The air here was different, charged with the clean metallic scent of advanced machinery and the subtle earthy smell of the biological compounds he worked with. "My sanctuary, Aris," said his voice, echoing slightly in the large circular room. "Please have a seat." He guided her to a chair that molded to her Cathar frame, a small consideration that did not go unnoticed. For the next several hours Aris spoke. He did not use condescendingly simple terms. He spoke to her as a scientific peer. He laid out the schematics for the Archimedes system, projecting them onto a holographic display she could not see, but could hear the faint crackle of. He described the core component, a bio-integrated crystalline processor, grown in 0G from a silicon-carbon matrix. This crystal wouldn't just see, it would interpret. "The problem isn't the camera, it's the processor," he explained, his voice filled with a passion that was infectious. "Standard cybernetic eyes send raw data. The brain struggles to translate it, leading to cognitive dissonance and rejection. The Archimedes crystal acts as a preprocessor. It learns your brain's unique neural patterns, the very shape of your thoughts, and translates the photonic data into a signal your visual cortex will recognize as its own native language." Kalen listened, her sharp mind, visualizing the processes, the data pathways, the potential points of failure. "The interface," she said, cutting through his explanation. "The connection to the cortex. You plan to use microbial nanites to weave the connection." "Correct?" Aris fell silent for a beat. "Yes. How did you—" "Your published paper on nerve regeneration in Arcturian sandworms. You theorized that modified nanites could map and bond with non-humanoid neural structures. An elegant theory. You intend to use them to bridge the gap between your artificial crystal and my organic brain." "Precisely," Aris confirmed, a note of awe in his voice. "They will map the dormant pathways of your visual cortex and integrate the crystalline lens's filaments on a microscopic level. It's the only way to achieve the bandwidth required for Cathar perception without causing a massive neural feedback loop." She processed this. It was audacious. It was brilliant. It was terrifyingly invasive. It meant surrendering the last untouched part of herself, her mind, to his human technology. "Show me," she commanded softly. She heard Aris move across the lab. He returned, and a moment later she felt a small, smooth object being placed gently into her open palm. It was cool to the touch, no larger than her thumb, and faceted like a jewel. It seemed to hum with a barely perceptible energy. "A prototype lens," he said. "Hold it. Feel it. It's not just a machine, Kalen. It's a new form of life, in a way. It learns." She closed her fingers around the crystal. The faint vibration seemed to resonate with her own body's energy. For a fleeting, dizzying moment, she felt a phantom flicker behind her scarred eyes, a spark of static in the endless dark. She gasped and dropped the lens which Eris caught deftly before it hit the floor. What was that? She whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs. Resonance, Eris said, his voice tight with excitement. The crystal is attuned to bioelectric fields. Your Cathar biology is far more energetic than human physiology. It was passively reacting to you. That's a good sign. A very good sign. Kaelin took a deep, shuddering breath, trying to calm herself. That single spark of impossible sensation had shaken her more than 15 years of total darkness. It was the ghost of sight. You ask for a great deal of trust, Doctor, she said, her voice strained. I know. She fell into a long silence, her mind a whirlwind. She thought of her trial, the cold, impassive faces of the judiciary, the searing pain of the optical cauterizer, the final chilling words of High Justica Valerius as her world dissolved into blackness. You sought a knowledge that was not yours to have. Let this darkness be your only truth. For 15 years she had accepted that truth. She had built a life, however meager within its confines. This human, with his quiet intensity and his own ghosts, was offering to shatter her reality. If it failed, it could destroy her mind. If it succeeded, who would she be? The person she was before. That Kaelin was gone, lost in the trauma. The Kaelin of now was a creature of shadow and sound. Would the light erase her too? Before I give you my answer, she said, her voice regaining its strength, you must understand why this was done to me. You must know the nature of the sin for which I was condemned. It was not just for loving the wrong person. Eris pulled up another chair, the soft scrape of its legs on the deck the only sound. I'm not the one who needs to be convinced, Kaelin. But I will listen. She took another breath, feeling the weight of years pressing down. My lover, Rorik. He was of the technician caste, genetically deemed suited for labor, not for high-concept science. Our union was a violation of the purity codes. That was the crime they announced to the public. But it wasn't the real reason Oris guessed. No, Kaelin confirmed, her claws extending slightly and scraping against the armrest. The real reason was my work. I was a xenobotanist specializing in genetic sequencing of alien flora. Rorik was my assistant. Together we were studying a plant from a world called Xylos, a parasitic orchid. This orchid, it didn't just draw nutrients from its host. It rewrote the host's genetic code, repairing flaws, strengthening it, but at a cost. It made the host sterile. She paused, gathering her thoughts. While sequencing the orchid, I found a unique marker, a retrovirus woven into its structure. Out of scientific curiosity, I compared it to our own Cathar genetic database. I found a match. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. A match, Eris prompted. A near-identical sequence dormant in our genome. In some of our genome, I ran a wider search, and I discovered the truth. A terrible, society-shattering truth. The sequence was present in almost 90% of the ruling caste, the Justicars, the Elders, the Purebloods. But it was absent in the lower castes, the technicians, the warriors, the artisans. What was it? Eris asked, his voice low. A genetic fail-safe, a cleverly hidden degenerative flaw. Our ancestors, fearing that the ruling caste might become too powerful, too long-lived, engineered a flaw into their own bloodlines. A flaw that would manifest after a certain number of generations, causing genetic collapse, sterility, neurological decay, systemic failure. My projections showed that the first signs would begin to manifest within the next 2 generations. The great pure-blooded Cathar leadership was on the verge of biological extinction, and they knew it. They had known for decades, and had hidden it desperately and secretly searching for a cure. The pieces clicked into place for Oris. And your research, my research into the xylose orchid, represented a potential cure Kaelin finished for him, a way to repair the flaw. But it would also sterilize them. They would save themselves, but their pure bloodlines would end. Furthermore, to reveal the flaw would be to admit the lie their entire society was built on, that their genetic purity made them superior and fit to rule. Rorik and I, we believed the people had a right to know. We were preparing to leak my findings. She felt a wave of cold sorrow wash over her. They found out. Rorik was taken for re-education. I never saw him again. I was put on trial. They couldn't execute me. My knowledge was too valuable. They couldn't imprison me, I might talk. So they chose a different path. They took my sight so I could never work in a lab again. They took my ability to have children, so my rebellious genes would not be passed on. They muted me. They left me alive, but erased my ability to threaten them. They buried me in darkness and silence. She finally finished her breath, catching in her throat. She had not spoken these words aloud in 15 years. The telling left her feeling hollowed out, exposed. Aris was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with a new, harder emotion. They didn't just blind you, Kaelin. They tried to extinguish you. He stood up and walked over to her. She felt his hand gently touch her shoulder. It was the first non-accidental, human touch she had felt in over a decade. It was warm, firm, and steady. The judiciary of Catharia Prime wanted your truth to die in the dark. He said, his voice a low, fierce promise. I say, let's show them the light. In that moment, the fear did not vanish. But for the first time in 15 years, another feeling rose to meet it, a burning, defiant spark of rage. A desire not just for sight, but for vindication. All right, Dr. Kaelin, whispered her decision made. Let's begin. The days leading up to the procedure were a meticulous dance of preparation. Kaelin was subjected to a battery of tests that pushed the limits of her endurance. Deep-level neural scans mapped every synapse of her brain, creating a three-dimensional atlas of her mind. Metabolic analyzers monitored her unique Cathar biochemistry, ensuring Eris could create a perfectly balanced nutrient and sedative regimen for the surgery. Through it all, Oris was a constant, calming presence. He explained every procedure, every reading on the monitors she could only hear. He never treated her as a patient, but as a collaborator. They debated the optimal placement of the nanite injection, points the precise frequency for the crystalline lens's initial calibration, and the ethical subroutines that should govern its learning algorithm. During one long session in the neural scanner, a claustrophobic tube that hummed and clicked around her, the memories of her trial resurfaced with agonizing clarity. The sterile air of the scanner pod became the cold, sterile air of the Hall of Judgment on Catharia Prime. She remembered standing on the central dais, her hands bound in energy cuffs. The gallery was filled with the silent, accusing faces of her peers, her former colleagues. Towering above them all on a throne, carved from a single piece of obsidian, sat High Justicar Valerius. Valerius was the epitome of the Cathar ideal. Tall and imposing, with fur the color of polished slate and eyes like chips of amber. He had been a mentor to her once, admiring her brilliant mind. Now those amber eyes held nothing but cold disappointment and unwavering resolve. Kaelin of the science cadre, his voice had boomed each word, resonating with absolute authority. You stand accused of violating the covenant of purity and engaging in seditious research with the intent to destabilize the foundational principles of our society. She had tried to argue. The principle is a lie. Justica. Our foundation is cracking. The data doesn't lie. Data is meaningless without context and wisdom. Valerius had retorted, his voice slicing through her protests. You see only the fractured pieces, the single gene, the isolated projection. You lack the perspective to see the whole. Our society is a delicate ecosystem. Your truth would be a plague, a wildfire that would burn it all to ash. It would incite panic, chaos, and civil war. So you condemn us all to extinction, to maintain order. She had cried out, her voice raw. We condemn you to save the rest, Valerius had declared, his gaze unwavering. Your love for a low-caste technician was a symptom of your greater disease, a refusal to accept your place to honor the structure that has kept us strong for millennia. You reached for knowledge that was forbidden, a power you were not meant to wield. He had risen from his throne, then descending the steps to stand before her. He reached out, and for a terrifying moment, she thought he meant to strike her. Instead, his clawed fingers gently tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his gaze. Your eyes, he had whispered, his voice a low, chilling lament. They saw too much. A flaw in the code. So we must remove the flaw, and we must remove the observer. The memories of the punishment itself were a blur of white-hot pain and the smell of burning tissue. The world of light color and form was violently ripped away, leaving only a screaming black void. The subsequent procedure, the one that ensured her bloodline ended, with her, was a cold clinical violation that left her feeling like a hollowed-out vessel. Kalen, can you hear me? Your heart rate is spiking. Aris's voice cut through the memory, pulling her back to the humming present of the scanner tube. She was trembling, the fur on her arms slick with a cold sweat. I'm here, she managed to say, her voice tight. Just a memory, Valerius Aris asked gently. He knew the name from their previous conversation. Yes, she breathed. I can still feel his judgment. It's a weight I've carried every day. We're about to make that weight a little lighter, Aris said, his voice a firm anchor in the swirling chaos of her past. The scan is complete. We have everything we need. The final night before the surgery, a new visitor appeared at the door of her temporary room in the medical wing. The chime was unfamiliar, sharp and official. A Ms. Sterling to see you. Dr. Thorne, the station's automated voice announced. From Omnigen Corporation. Aris, who had been reviewing Kalen's final brain maps, stiffened. Let her in, he said, his voice losing its warmth. A human woman entered. She was dressed in a severe, perfectly tailored corporate suit, her hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her scent was faint, almost non-existent, scrubbed clean of personality, and replaced with something that smelled of currency and contracts. Ms. Sterling Aris said, his tone clipped. This is an unscheduled visit. A final check-in. Doctor, she said, her voice smooth and polished as riverstone. Her eyes flickered towards Kalen, a brief, dismissive glance. My employers are investing a considerable sum in your project. They wish to ensure their investment is secure. The project is proceeding as planned, Aris replied, moving to stand slightly between Sterling and Kalen. Good. We'll need a full data dump of the procedure in real time. All neural activity, all sensory input, all of the Archimedes system's learning processes, Sterling stated. It was not a request. Kalen's ears swiveled towards the woman. She could hear the subtle, rapid beat of her heart, the controlled, even breathing. This woman was not a scientist or a doctor. She was something else. A handler. That is proprietary and highly sensitive data, Aris countered, his voice dangerously low. It pertains to my patient's direct neural experience. Your patient signed a release when she agreed to this experimental procedure, Sterling said, coolly, holding up a data slate. Omnigen, as the primary funder, retains full rights to all data and technology developed as a result. Clause 117, subsection B. You signed it too, Doctor. Aris was silent. Kalen could feel the tension radiating from him. He was trapped. What does a resource extraction corporation want with medical technology? Kalen asked, her voice cutting through the silence. Sterling finally turned her full attention to Kalen. A faint, condescending smile touched her lips. Omnigen is a forward-thinking company, my dear. We believe in diversification. Imagine a scout drone that can see in multiple spectrums and process visual data faster than any supercomputer. Imagine a soldier whose targeting system is hardwired into their brain, capable of spotting a camouflaged enemy from a kilometer away. Sight is not just for seeing, it's for targeting. It's a tool, and Dr. Thorne is building us the best tool we've ever seen. The cold reality of the situation settled over Kalen. Aris's noble quest to heal his tribute to his lost sister was being funded by merchants of death. They weren't curing her blindness out of altruism. They were using her as a testbed for a new class of weapon. Aris's dream was being twisted into a nightmare, and she was right at the center of it. Sterling gave a curt nod. I have a shuttle to catch. I expect the data stream to be active when the procedure begins, Doctor. Do not disappoint. She turned and left the door hissing shut behind her, leaving a chilling silence in her wake. Kalen could hear the ragged, angry breaths Aris was trying to suppress. I'm sorry, Kalen, he said, his voice choked with frustration. I needed the funding. No one else would touch this research. I thought I could control it, keep the pure science separate from their applications. You made a deal with a devil to build an angel, Kalen murmured. A common story. She felt a strange sense of calm descend upon her. The stakes had just been raised exponentially. This was no longer just about her or Aris's ghost. It was about ensuring her cure did not become a new curse upon the galaxy. It changes nothing about tomorrow, she said, her voice firm. We proceed. Aris looked at her, his unseen expression a mix of surprise and gratitude. You're still willing more than ever, Kalen replied, a grim determination hardening her resolve. When they punished me, they told me I sought power I was not meant to wield. Perhaps they were right. But if your technology works, Doctor, I will have that power, and I will not let people like her be the ones to control it. The operating theater was cold. Kalen could feel the chill on her bare skin as she was transferred to the surgical table. A medical droid with silent, precise movements began attaching biosensors to her chest and temples. Aris's voice was a steady presence in the room, directing the droid checking the readouts on the monitors, his words a shield against her rising fear. We're ready to begin sedation, Kalen, he said, his hand resting briefly on her arm. The first phase is the most invasive. We need to remove the scar tissue and prepare the orbital sockets. You'll be under for the duration. I am ready, she said, her own voice betraying a slight tremor. The hiss of the sedative entering her bloodstream was the last thing she heard. Darkness, her constant companion, deepened into the dreamless oblivion of anesthesia. For Oris, the next 8 hours were a symphony of high-stakes neurosurgery. The view on his high-resolution monitor showed the delicate, damaged landscape of Kalen's orbital cavity. With microscopic lasers and robotic manipulators, he painstakingly cleared away the 15-year-old scar tissue, a brutal testament to the judiciary's cruelty. He exposed the atrophied nubs of the severed optic nerves, useless now, but still connected to the intricate pathways of her brain. His every move was precise, economical. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but his hands were rock steady. He was not just a surgeon. He was an artist restoring a masterpiece that had been slashed and burned. He ignored the blinking icon in the corner of his screen that confirmed the real-time data feed to Omnigen was active. He had to. To think of Sterling and her weapons would be to compromise the mission. Once the sockets were prepared, the true challenge began. He introduced the two Archimedes lenses, the faceted crystals gleaming under the surgical lights. They were beautiful alien things pulsing with a soft internal light. He set them into place, where her eyes had once been. Initiating Phase 2, he announced to the silent room. Releasing the nanite swarm, he pressed a sequence of commands on his console. From a microscopic port on the back of each crystalline lens, a shimmering, almost invisible cloud was released into her body. Billions of microbial machines, programmed with one single complex purpose, to find the visual cortex and build a bridge. On the main screen, a new display came to life. It was a stunning real-time map of Kaylin's brain, with the nanites represented as a river of flowing light. Aris watched his breath held as the swarm surged along her neural pathways. They were following the old dormant channels of the optic nerves, mapping the ghostly traces of her former sight. It was working. The theory was sound. The river of light reached the occipital lobe at the back of her brain, the seat of the visual cortex. Then, the nanites began to weave. Like microscopic spiders, they started extruding filaments, a single molecule thick, connecting the processor of the Archimedes lens to the trillions of individual neurons of her brain. It was a process of breathtaking complexity, a fusion of the artificial and the organic on a scale never before attempted. Hours bled into one another. Iris monitored her vitals, adjusting the flow of nutrients and oxygen, ensuring her brain remained stable under the immense strain of the rewiring. The data flowing to his console was staggering. He could see the crystalline lenses beginning to communicate with her brain, sending tiny subconscious pings of data, learning the rhythm and flow of her neural architecture. Finally, the connection was complete. The nanite swarm went dormant, becoming a permanent living part of her. The bridge was built. Integration is at 100%, Aris whispered, a wave of exhaustion and elation washing over him. Bring her up slowly. Very slowly. The flow of anesthetic was reduced. Aris watched her brain activity on the monitor. He saw the slow, gentle waves of sleep begin to change to sharpen. Electrical impulses started to flicker in her visual cortex for the first time in 15 years. The new eyes were connected. They were online, but they were not yet open. He made the final adjustments, setting the initial light input to the absolute minimum, 0.01%. Anything more would be like staring into the sun. "Kaylin," he said, his voice soft but clear. "Kaylin, can you hear me? The procedure is over. Everything went perfectly. I'm going to activate the lenses now. It will be very gentle. Just a little light. Are you ready?" He waited, watching her vitals. After a long moment, he saw her hand clench into a fist. A sign. She was ready. With a trembling finger, Aris tapped the activation key on his console. Activating, he breathed. Now, for Kaylin, consciousness returned not as a rush, but as a slow, creeping tide. The first sense to return was hearing the low, rhythmic beep of her own heart monitor the whisper of the air circulation, the soft rustle of Oris's movements nearby, the familiar symphony of her dark world. Then something new. It was not a sound, a smell, or a touch. It was a feeling deep within her mind, in a place that had been silent and dead for 15 years. A faint tingling hum like a phantom limb coming back to life. It was the Archimedes system, awake and waiting. "Kaelin, I'm here." Eris's voice was close. "Don't try to move yet. Just breathe." She obeyed, taking a slow, deep breath. "I'm going to begin the activation sequence," he said. "The initial input is minimal. It won't be like you remember. It will be shapes, grays. Your brain has to learn how to see again. Ready?" She could not form words, but she managed a slight nod. A soft click echoed in the room, and then it happened. The absolute, total blackness that had been her entire reality was pierced by a single infinitesimal point of grey. It was not black. It was other. The shock of it was a physical blow. A gasp escaped her lips, a raw, strangled sound. The grey wavered, shimmering at the edge of her perception. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever experienced. "It's okay," Aris's voice soothed her. "That's the overhead surgical light. Just a dim grey shape. Let your brain accept it." She focused on the grey shape, her mind reeling. Slowly, painfully, other shades began to differentiate themselves from the black. A darker grey that was the edge of the ceiling panels. A slightly lighter grey that was the wall. Tears she could not physically shed burned behind her new eyes. More, she rasped her voice, raw. Slowly Aris cautioned, but he complied. He tapped another key. The input increased by another fraction of a percent. The grey world bloomed, gaining a hint of texture and depth. The single shape of Eris, who was standing beside her, resolved itself from the background. He was a pillar of dark grey against a lighter grey wall. She could distinguish his head, his shoulders, his arms. She could see him move. An overwhelming sob broke from her. It was a sound of grief and joy and 1,000 other emotions for which there were no names. It was the sound of a universe being reborn. Over the next few hours, Aris slowly increased the input. Greys gave way to muted, washed-out colours. The first colour she truly perceived was the soft blue of the medical blanket covering her. It was so faint, yet so vibrant it made her ache. She saw the metallic silver of a tool tray, the dark brown of Aris's hair, the pale colour of his own skin. She reached out a trembling hand, not to feel, but to see. She watched, mesmerized, as her own long silver-furred fingers came into view. She had not seen her own hands since she was a young woman. They were different now, more slender, the knuckles more pronounced. But they were hers. By the end of the day, she could sit up her new eyes, taking in the world with a ravenous hunger. Everything was a miracle. The way light reflected off a glass of water, the complex grid of the ceiling tiles, the lines on Aris's tired, smiling face. "Thank you," she whispered the words, utterly inadequate. "Aris, thank you." "Welcome back, Kaelin," he said, his own voice thick with emotion. But as the days turned into a week, something strange began to happen. Her brain, with its incredible Cathar processing power, was adapting to the Archimedes system at a rate Aris had never thought possible. Colours became vivid, details became sharp. She could soon read the fine print on a medical canister from across the room. But she was beginning to see more. It started as a subtle shimmer, an almost imperceptible distortion around active technology. The main computer console in the lab had a faint, bluish aura. The comms unit pulsed with a soft golden light whenever it received a transmission. "Aris," she said, one afternoon staring at the lab's main power conduit. "Do you see that?" "See what?" he asked, looking up from a diagnostic slate. "The conduit. It's glowing, a deep violet colour, and it flickers like a heartbeat." Aris walked over to the conduit. "I don't see anything, Kaelin. It's just a standard power line." He ran a scanner over it. "Energy output is normal. No EM fluctuations." Kaelin looked from the glowing conduit to Aris, and for the first time she noticed it on him too. A very faint, pale green aura that seemed to cling to his skin. It shifted and brightened when he spoke, dimmed when he was silent. "The Archimedes system isn't just seeing light," she said slowly, her mind racing to comprehend the new data. "The crystal, it's not just interpreting the visible spectrum, it's processing more. It's seeing energy, biosignatures, data streams." Aris stared at her, a look of dawning horror and wonder on his face. "That's impossible. It wasn't designed for that. Your human brain would reject that data as noise," Kaelin theorized, her scientist's mind taking over. "It would be a schizophrenic nightmare. But my brain, it's Cathar. It has the capacity to process it, to translate it into a new layer of sight." At that exact moment, a chime at the lab door announced an incoming message. On the main screen, Ms. Sterling's face appeared, and what Kaelin saw made her blood run cold. The image of Sterling on the screen was normal, but emanating from the comms unit itself was a thick, cloying stream of what Kaelin could only describe as dark red energy flowing out into the station's network, and attached to that stream like a leech was a secondary encrypted signal. Kaelin could see it, a thin, sharp line of crimson light snaking away from the main feed. It was the data stream from her procedure, the one Omnigen had demanded. But there was another one, a secret one. While Aris was engaged in a terse conversation with Sterling about project milestones, Kaelin focused on the hidden signal. Using her new sight, she could follow the crimson thread as it branched off, routing through a series of shielded relays before connecting to a secure server. A military-grade server. The server's designation flashed in her vision, not as text, but as a unique energy signature she could somehow read. Cathar Judiciary Fleet Command. Omnigen wasn't just selling her site to the highest bidder. They were selling it back to the very people who had stolen it from her. They were giving Valerius and the Judiciary the schematics for a technology that could see through their lies, or worse, be used to create enforcers who could spot dissenters by the flicker of their biosignature. Aris finished the call, his face grim. More demands. They want the calibration logs. Aris Kaelin said, her voice dangerously calm. They're not just taking your data. They're selling it. To the Cathar Judiciary. His face went pale. How could you possibly know that I can see it? She said, pointing a trembling finger at the still pulsing comms unit. I can see the signal, the routing, the destination. They've betrayed you. They've betrayed us both. The joy of her restored sight evaporated, replaced by an icy dread. Her new eyes had not just shown her the light of the world. They had shown her the shadows lurking within it, and the shadow of her own past was now racing towards them at the speed of light. 3 days. That was all the time they had. 3 days between Kaelin's discovery and the arrival of the Cathar Judiciary vessel. Its energy signature, a piercing amber lance in her enhanced vision, grew brighter with each passing hour as it burned a path through subspace towards Kepler's drift. Panic was a luxury they couldn't afford. They won't dock officially, Aris reasoned, pacing the confines of his lab. His own pale green aura was a frantic, flickering storm. They'll send a small, unmarked shuttle. It'll be a Black Ops mission, an extraction, or an assassination. Valerius will come himself, Kaelin stated, with chilling certainty. She sat perfectly still at the central console, her new eyes watching the flow of data and energy through the station's systems. This is a matter of doctrinal purity. He will not delegate. Her calm was a stark contrast to his agitation. The 15 years in darkness had taught her a patience that was now her greatest weapon. She was no longer just a scientist. She was an intelligence analyst, processing a new and unique form of data. "We need to run," Aris said, stopping his pacing. "We can book passage on a freighter, lose ourselves in the outer rim." "No," Kaelin said, her voice cutting him off. Her silver-flecked gaze, now clear and focused, met his. "For 15 years I lived in a prison they made for me. I will not spend the rest of my life in a bigger one of our own making. I will not run from him again." A new resolve burned in her. The rage she had felt before was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. Her discovery of the genetic flaw had been a threat. This new sight, this was a weapon. Valerius had inadvertently given her the very tool she needed to expose the truth he had tried to bury. "He is coming here to erase a mistake," Kaelin continued. "He believes my sight is a violation of his sentence. I will show him it is the fulfillment of his judgment." Their preparations were swift. Aris, using his high-level medical credentials, requisitioned the station's main holographic broadcast suite in the central atrium, citing the need for a post-operative diagnostic presentation. He locked out all external overrides, giving him sole control of the public address system. Meanwhile, Kaelin practiced. She learned to focus her new sight to modulate the overwhelming flow of information. She learned to distinguish the subtle energy signatures of different species, the chaotic flicker of fear from the steady hum of confidence. Most importantly, she learned to project what she saw. By interfacing with Aris's data slate, she found she could translate the energy patterns her eyes perceived into a visual representation on the screen. It was crude, a swirling dance of colors and light, but it was a true image of her new perception. On the third day, she saw it. A small, sleek ship, its energy signature masked, but not invisible to her, detached from the larger vessel in high orbit and began its descent. It landed not at the main docking bay, but at a private corporate hangar. Omnigen's hangar. Ms. Sterling had paved their way. "He's here," Kaelin said to Oris over their private comm link. She was already in the central atrium, standing on the speaker's platform, looking for all the world like a patient about to give a testimonial. Aris was in the control booth above, ready. The atrium was a vast, open space, bustling with the station's diverse population. Humans, Rigelians, Arcturians, and a dozen other species mingled under the soft glow of the simulated sky. None of them knew they were about to witness a trial that had been delayed for 15 years. Then she saw him. High Justicar Valerius entered the atrium from the corporate sector. He was not in his formal robes, but in simple dark traveling clothes. He was flanked by 2 Cathar guards, their biosignatures pulsing with disciplined aggression. But Valerius, his aura was a sight to behold. It was a magnificent, complex tapestry of gold and amber, perfectly controlled, radiating an almost palpable sense of authority and conviction. It was the energy of a man who had never once doubted his own righteousness. His eyes, those piercing amber orbs she remembered so well, swept the crowd and found her instantly. There was no surprise, only a flicker of grim satisfaction. He had expected her to be waiting. He and his guards moved through the crowd, which parted before them instinctively. He walked directly to the foot of the platform, his gaze locked on her restored eyes. The silver flecks in her irises, a genetic trait of her lineage, seemed to mesmerize him for a moment. "The muted one speaks with light again," Valerius said, his voice, a low purr that carried easily in the sudden hush that had fallen over the atrium. "A human sickness has undone a righteous cure." "You did not cure me," Valerius Kaelin replied, her voice steady and clear, amplified by the platform's microphone. "You only blinded yourself to the truth. I saved our people from a truth that would have been their poison," he countered, taking a step onto the platform. His guards remained below their hands, resting on the hilts of their sidearms. "I have come to correct this error. You will return to Catharia Prime with me. The sentence will be reimposed permanently." "I am no longer subject to your laws," Kaelin said, standing her ground. Valerius smiled a cold, predatory expression. "Our laws are carried in our blood, a fact you of all people should appreciate. You are Cathar. You will always be subject to them." He took another step closer, his powerful aura pressing in on her. "Your human doctor has given you trinkets, baubles of light, but I am here to give you back the peace of darkness." This was the moment. "You speak of blood, Justica Kaelin," said her voice, rising to fill the massive space. "Let's talk about blood. Let's talk about the lie you have protected for generations." From the control booth, Aris activated the main holographic projector. A massive, swirling image of colored light appeared above them, a duplicate of what Kaelin was seeing through her new eyes. The crowd gasped, murmuring in confusion at the strange, abstract display. "What is this witchcraft?" Valerius snarled. "This is not witchcraft," Kaelin declared. "This is sight, a new kind of sight. I see the energy within all things. I see the calm blue of the hydroponic plants over there. I see the chaotic red of fear from the child hiding behind his mother. And Justica, I see you." She focused her vision on him, and the hologram shifted, zooming in on the image of his aura. It showed the brilliant gold of his discipline, the amber of his authority. But deep within it, woven into the very fabric of his biosignature, was a flaw. A dark, jagged thread of sickly grey energy coiling like a serpent around his heart. "What is that?" she asked, her voice ringing with the power of a prosecutor. "That grey thread, Valerius. That stain on your pure blood. You see, my new eyes don't just see light. They see the code. They see the truth you tried to bury. They see the degenerative flaw, the genetic sentence of extinction that hangs over you and every member of the ruling caste." Valerius stared at the hologram, his composure finally cracking. He looked at the swirling image of his own life force, his deepest, most protected secret, laid bare for the entire station to see. For the first time, his amber eyes showed not conviction, but a flicker of pure, unadulterated fear. "This changes nothing," he roared, drawing a ceremonial blade from his belt. The polished metal weapon hummed with energy. "I will cut this blasphemy from the world." He lunged. Valerius lunged with terrifying speed, his energy blade a blur. But to Kaelin's new sight, he was a predictable pattern of energy. Sidestepping his furious attacks with an impossible grace, she saw the lines of his intent before he moved. He was a storm of rage, but she was the calm eye reading the currents of his fury. "Your anger makes you clumsy," she stated, her voice amplified throughout the silent atrium. The hologram above showed his brilliant aura being corrupted by the jagged grey flaw within a secret now laid bare for all to see. He roared in denial, charging for a final desperate strike. This time Kaelin didn't dodge. She met his attack by placing her hand over his heart, sending a focused pulse of energy not to harm, but to connect. For a single shattering moment, Valerius saw himself, as she did, a being of brilliant power, fundamentally corrupted by the lie he protected. The vision broke him. His blade clattered to the floor as he sank to his knees, his authority and conviction erased by a single unbearable moment of self-knowledge. He had been defeated, not by a weapon, but by the truth. In the aftermath, the Cathar ship retreated in disgrace, and Omnigen's charter was revoked. Standing in the observatory a week later, Kaelin looked out at the real stars. She told Aris she wouldn't return to her home world now in turmoil, but on a path to truth. Her work was out here now. "I am something new," she said, her crystal eyes reflecting 1,000 suns. "And for the first time in a very long time, I am looking forward to the sunrise." The story of Kaelin and Dr. Aris Thorne is a testament to the idea that true sight isn't just about what our eyes can see, but what our hearts can understand. It's about the incredible potential of humanity to heal, to redeem, and to fight for a truth that others would bury in darkness. It's a story of second chances, not just for a woman who lost her world, but for a man haunted by his past, both finding their purpose in the most unlikely of alliances. What does it truly mean to see? Is it merely perceiving light, or is it understanding the shadows? If Kaelin's journey from absolute darkness into a world of impossible light moved you, please let us know. These are the stories we love to tell. Hit that like button to show your support. Share this story with someone who loves tales of justice and redemption, and be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next journey into the vast expanse of science fiction storytelling. Thank you for listening.